Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Living Out Loud, the podcast by domestic abuse survivors for domestic abuse victims, survivors, and their support systems. It is just me. Dee Dee had to step away from the podcast for reasons that were extremely valid. And so you're going to have to suffer through another episode of just me. I can understand how that would be, slightly traumatic. So today, this topic is one that I came across and kind of cobbled together myself because I found it interesting. And in no way, anything that I am sharing in this episode, I am not condoning, I am not vilifying, I am not judging. I'm not pro, I'm not against, this is in no way an agenda or anything like that. It was just something that I found really interesting. Yeah, so I'm going to start by reading you something. And as my dad used to say, stop me if you've heard this before. So I'm going to read you something. And I think a lot of you might recognize it. Um, in the name of God, I, blank, insert name, take you, insert name, to be my husband/wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until we are parted by death. This is my solemn vow. Those are traditional wedding vows, and those are traditional wedding vows actually taken from a Protestant church. Um, and when you read that and when you hear that, as many people in this world have, um, very binding, very final, um, great sentiment, really. I mean, hopeful, positive, loving. It's a great sentiment. Also, a sentiment that I don't know if a lot of people, when they're actually entering it, um, recognize the solemnity of those words, and the weight of those words. And when you talk about, staying together until we are parted by death, and you're looking at 60 years spanning out in front of you, don't really know what's going to happen in those 60 years. So it's a leap of faith for sure. A lot of us have taken it. I've taken it. Um, but I'd like to take those words and that vow and that bind and put it into something a little bit more every day. So, say instead of this being a wedding vow or a wedding marriage ceremony, because the wedding's just one day, the marriage is supposedly forever. Let's take that sentiment and put it in the form of a job contract. Okay. So take those words, take that sentiment, move them around so that they apply to a job contract and you signing it. Okay. So you sign it and you enter into this contract and you start this position based on these parameters. And in the beginning, it's great, right? Like you get like a welcome basket, the break room is insane. Um, benefits, seems like a great culture. And you wholeheartedly enter into it, right? You sign up for this. And things start to change. Um, perhaps you have to work longer hours with no additional pay. Perhaps your work is criticized, but in your mind, new job, I'm new, of course, criticism would come along. It just spurs me on to work harder and do better, so that I can finally get that praise that I'm sure is coming, right? And then in meetings, your ideas are ridiculed, which is a little humiliating because it's in front of other people. Perhaps certain perks are taken away. Maybe you aren't allowed to use the break room anymore. Maybe you're not allowed breaks. Perhaps other things start to happen, like benefits are taken from you, health insurance, paid time off. And then your work is never good enough. And when your work is never good enough, there's consequences, there's punishment, there's, you know, more things taken away from you. Perhaps your salary is withheld. Now, we know that in regular working environments, this would not happen because it would probably break about a zillion employment laws. But stick with me because this is a metaphor. So you take a look around and you realize that this situation has deteriorated and is not what you thought it was going to be. And your quality of life has decreased and your standard of living has decreased. And this job is creating stress, emotional, mental stress that might be manifesting itself physically. And you wonder to yourself, okay, wait a minute. Did I make a mistake? Because this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not what I signed up for. Is it like this everywhere? Or are there businesses that don't treat their employees this way? Are there businesses where there is a high level of employee satisfaction, employee fulfillment, happiness, acceptance, safety, security, stability, where you're praised and not criticized, where your employer, your boss, your coworkers are interested in your evolvement or your growth or becoming, a better employee, a better self, that you're supported in that endeavor. Do these places exist? Or are all jobs like the one that I'm in right now, where I'm incredibly unhappy? I don't feel secure. My boss is abusive in my space, my personal space, threatening stance, critical, judgmental, tears me apart, tears me down. Are there companies where it's not like this? And so you decide to take a look around and you research other companies and perhaps you even interview and you find that no, it's not like this everywhere. You find that there are places where you are valued and where your worth is recognized and where they want to support you and where they want to see you do better and they want to watch you grow as a person and they're interested in your growth as a person and they applaud your growth as a person and they don't try to stymie it and they don't try to stop you and they don't try to tear you down and dominate you and make you fearful. And you think to yourself, should I interview with one of these places? Should I interview and go talk to them and go see what it's all about? Should I even accept position elsewhere if it's offered? When these people are showing me that they want me, they desire me, they value me as a person, should I take that job? Should I just stay in the one that I have because a job is better than no job, even with me being as unhappy as I am? Do I take the risk and leave this job and suffer the consequences? Or do I look elsewhere and see what happens? or maybe just the idea of those other jobs being out there is enough for me to maybe just leave the job that I'm in, not take a new one, but just leave where I'm at because it's making me so desperately unhappy. And that my quality of life and my standard of living is so low. And this job does not fulfill me. If anything, this job brings me down and makes me feel like less of a person. What do you do? What do you do? Again, a metaphor. But I think that there are people out there listening, hopefully listening, um, that we've left jobs that didn't make us happy because we had that prerogative. And why would you stay somewhere you're not happy? Especially if there's other options out there that suit you better, that make you happy, value you, and recognize your worth. Again, this is a metaphor. So would you stay even though you had vowed, not to leave until death do you part from your partner? Would you stay? I mean, we don't stay in jobs that make us unhappy. Why would we stay in marriages that make us unhappy? Why would we stay in relationships that make us unhappy when there are options out there, whether the option is to be on your own, find yourself again, or whether that option is to find happiness elsewhere that might be in the form of another person. And here's where it gets interesting. The reason that I came up with this topic, if you can call it that, is I found an article on a site called The Swaddler, and it's from 2022. This is where it's going to get tricky, folks. And the title is How Some People in Abusive Relationships Found Comfort and Freedom Through Infidelity. Now, like I said in the beginning, this is not me condoning anything. This is not me vilifying anything. This is not me being for, against, pro, con, not trying to incite a riot about societal constructs or religious constructs in regards to infidelity. However, this article goes on to say that infidelity can sometimes enable people to gain self-esteem they may have lost as a result of being in an abusive relationship, even empowering them to leave their abusive partners. Like I said, this is tricky. We obviously, in our society, and this has existed for a long time, I mean, obviously going back to the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not commit adultery. Those are some pretty old commandments in a world that has evolved and changed. Can we still apply that to a situation where someone is being physically abused, verbally abused, emotionally abused, mentally abused, financially abused, spiritually abused to an extent where they feel hopeless? Humans want connection. That goes without saying. And in this article, several people come forward. Some are anonymous. That a relationship that existed outside of their union, whether that was marriage or, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, a relationship that existed outside of their union, whether it was emotional, sexual, mental, um, helped them to find their value again. In some cases, helped them to leave. You can see how this would cause a little contention, just based on people's personal values, whether they're religious, social, but in a very rapidly changing world where a lot of behaviors are now acknowledged as abusive, where we see in the papers almost daily um, rampant abuse that's physical, where we see violence and we see death in regards to spouses or partners taking the other person's life and even maybe their children or their own. Someone's been living with that, feels dehumanized, which can happen, and finds themselves human again for a moment, for a couple of weeks, for a couple of months, and realizes that no relationships don't have to be like this, and then I can have a better quality of life, and then I can have happiness, and it may not necessarily be with this person, it may just be that they realize they wanna get out, be on their own, or that they realize there is someone out there who's gonna value and love you. How do we feel about that? Societal and religious constructs have existed for a long time, and obviously they exist for a certain reason. You know, a lot of people like rules, it makes them comfortable. They know what to expect, they know what they're supposed to do, they know what they're not supposed to do. We tend to put people in categories of good or bad based on their behavior. Um, but as we also know, just from being human and taking a look around and reading anything that's in the news or seeing it on the news or even seeing it in your own life, maybe among friends or stories that you've heard, constructs exist, and sometimes people don't live inside of them. There is nothing that's cut and dried. Um, Rarely can you put someone into the category of just being a bad person because they've done something. This is where it gets a little like kind of philosophical, which is not, I'm not an expert in philosophy. You never really know what's going on in someone's relationship. So before you judge or before you hear a title of an article like infidelity, you know, help someone find comfort and freedom, you gotta like take a step back and you gotta think about it. Um, this is where judgment should not come in. We found this an interesting article, and many therapists are quoted in it. Um, and that it is kind of, it's one of the results of someone being abused is that when they come across someone, and it could just be a friendship, it doesn't have to be sexual. Again, it does not have to be sexual. But they realize that there are people out there, there are other people out there, there are people that exist that don't want to tear them apart. And it's possible to have positive, nurturing, fulfilling, loving relationship with someone else that doesn't involve abuse and that can exist within a non-abusive environment. So sometimes when these people step outside of their relationships and find value and worth again, it gives them the courage to leave. Like I said, sticky topic based upon certain views that exist. Now, something I felt was really interesting, Mariah Carey. Now, Yeah, I love All I Want for Christmas Is You. But I wouldn't say that I've like, followed her career, shall we say. If anything, sometimes she seemed like kind of a diva to me. I won't deny she's talented. Fuck yeah, man, she's totally talented. I will not deny that. She put out an autobiography that, was written along with somebody else back in 2020. And in there, she chronicles quite a few things. I mean, her life growing up and struggles she had, and like any autobiography does, she told her story. And she does in there speak to her first marriage to Tommy Mottola. She was very young, and he was 20 years older than her. But she does chronicle her relationship with Tommy Mottola. And to quote her from her book, she says, she described him as like humidity, inescapable, adding, "It felt like he was cutting off my circulation, keeping me from my friends and what little family I had. I couldn't talk to anyone that wasn't under Tommy's control. I couldn't go out or do anything with anybody. I couldn't move freely in my own home." And she talks about how he had cameras, security guards, motion sensors, so that if she got up in the middle of the night and went downstairs to like write a few lyrics and she tripped a motion sensor, he came on over the intercom saying, "What are you doing? Where are you? What's going on?" So she felt, well, trapped. He monitored her every move, her every move. And she makes a comment, and this is where it ties together, whether or not you people agree, disagree. Like I said, I'm not starting a riot here. I'm just putting an idea out there. She makes a comment when she was interviewed about this book. I don't know if this quote is actually in there, but she does say it at some point. She later added that her affair with Derek Jeter was the catalyst she needed to get out from under Tommy's crippling control. Okay. It's Mariah Carey. Okay. It's not everybody. But for her to actually put that out there publicly, knowing what some people's response to that would be, right? And how their opinions of her would change. I actually give her credit because she didn't have to share that. And I think it also shows you, even though it's Derek Jeter, I mean, come on, it's Derek Jeter. It's not like it's it's Derek Jeter. It shows you where she was in her life with the control from her first husband, that she was willing to blow her life up to get out. And that the relationship with Derek Jeter, she does say more about it, that she felt they had a connection. Like I said, humans want connection. That it was her catalyst for her to get out because she realized that there are people out there that don't treat other people like that. And they treat them as humans and they value them, their opinions, their thoughts, their emotions. You don't have someone tracking you in your own house to see what you're doing. I also find it incredibly brave that she wrote a book and knew it would be purchased by people. She's Mariah Carey, that told that put Tommy Mottola out there as a controlling figure, incredibly controlling figure. Because backlash is a dangerous thing, okay? But putting yourself up on the block and being willing to face the backlash takes some courage. But like I said, it also shows you the position she was in. This topic may make people uncomfortable. But if we take a moment and think about humanity and its complexities, and we think about society, ooh, sit at my desk, And we think about um, interpersonal relationships and we think about the statistics that exist about cheating. Cheating's nothing new, my friends. Like I said, I'm not condoning it, but cheating's nothing new. And the statistics are pretty interesting. Um, it's hard to gauge. It's like trying to pin a cloud down because so many people have different ideas of what cheating is. Some purely physical. If you're having sex with somebody else, you're cheating. To others, having an exchange with a friend at work that starts to become emotional but doesn't actually enter the realm of physical is cheating. And then we have new fun things like micro cheating, like you're walking down the street, look at that famous meme. You're walking down the street and, look at somebody else. What we're talking about here is that humanity is complex. Are there people that cheat for no good goddamn reason? 100%. Are there people involved in abusive relationships that find comfort and connection elsewhere? 100%. Do we apply the same societal constructs to both? I don't have an answer for that. I just find this to be interesting because probably because it makes people uncomfortable, but it's something that happens. And so within the realm of domestic abuse, domestic violence, there are so many different things that happen. And this is one of them. Of course, this topic has been explored on places like Reddit. I don't have any social media accounts. I don't read Reddit. But when that article came up, there was a whole bunch of like Reddit links below it. And people are very, 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 very divided on this issue. So it was just something that I wanted to bring up in episode 5 because it's I don't think it's something that people think about in regards to domestic abuse and violence. I think they only think about the actual abuse when they don't think about someone being so low and so disconnected and so lonely and so sad and so dehumanized that an act of infidelity would bring them back to themselves and help them leave. Sometimes it takes something that is taboo or frowned upon that you would never really actually make that connection that these two things could happen and that good could come out of it. But if somebody finds themselves again, someone who's abused finds themselves again due to the help, the comfort, strength of another and gets out of a situation that is awful, it's a hard, hard question to answer. It's a hard question to ask. Does it make it okay? Like I said, I'm not providing an answer to that. Um, but I think it's something that should be considered because you never know what is going on in someone's relationship, and you never know what's going on behind closed doors. And you may not know the reason that somebody commits an infidelity, and you may look down on them, and you may apply standard societal religious constructs to that behavior. But like with all behavior, you never know. So before you judge too harshly someone who has gone through that, like any judging, would you want to be put under a microscope for something that you are doing? Or should we let the complexity of being human give us empathy, compassion, and forgiveness for when someone makes a move that maybe seems taboo. So, again, here we are at the end. Next week, we shall have a guest. Well, in the coming weeks, we shall have guests because we can't just listen to me talk the whole time. I mean, God, that's boring as hell. So, next week, we shall have a guest. And as always, you know, thank you to Levi Britton for our music. Thank you to Mike Cohen for our intro outdoor slides. Thank you for Dee Dee for her participation in the first 2 episodes. I'm gonna keep going. Um, we'll see how this goes. We'll see how this plays out. But again, you matter. And if you don't believe me now, I'm gonna keep telling you until you do. So you matter. Thank you for listening and look forward to seeing you next time.